Welcome to At the Helm with Adventure Man Dan. Let's start the adventure. Hello and welcome to the 6th episode of At the Helm with Adventure Man Dan, the podcast where I talk about all aspects of the adventure lifestyle. I am so very honored for you all to be joining me here today. This is the 4th of December, 2020, and yet again, I am recording from my editing station aboard my sailboat Adventureborn, currently docked in Fort Pierce, Florida. Alright, so today I'm going to be talking about the dangers of the adventure lifestyle. A couple weeks ago, I very nearly lost my sailboat to a very surprising fire that just popped out of nowhere. Just the boat caught on fire for a bit. And it got me thinking about all the other dangers that I go through in the pursuit of this adventure lifestyle that is outside the norm. And for those of you, kind of wondering what dangers you got to face if you do want to pursue a similar lifestyle, in the end, this has always been 100% worth it. It's not like I'm going to stop anytime soon, but I thought it'd be worth talking about some of the expected and unexpected dangers that you've got to either dodge or endure to get the rewards of this lifestyle and accomplish your goals, whatever your adventure goals might be, whether it's spearfishing, sailing, kiteboarding, free climbing, hiking, long distance biking, whatever. I love hearing about all the different adventures people get on, so whatever suits your needs. But anyway, disclaimer, this is just my experiences and perspectives on each topic. You need to make your own assessment if you plan to get out there, and you need to decide what level of risk you're willing to take. Also, if you feel like I've missed something, please let me know in the comment section down below. I love hearing about, whatever other things other people can think of. I'm just one person. I can only think so far. So anyway, moving into it, I've got about 9 different topics I'm going to start covering here, from spearfishing, which obviously it's probably what I'm most known for is my spearfishing, as well as sailing, kiteboarding, backpacking around the world internationally, van life, one of my favorites, RV living, one of my not so favorites, but enjoyable. And then I'm going to dive into some of the social repercussions of an adventure lifestyle. I know I'm expanding the definition of danger on this one, but, bear with me on it. Move on to the next topic. Who you travel with is another one of those big dangers. And then finally, the 9th and last topic, I'm going to talk about how a solar panel almost burned. It caught my boat on fire. And if I wasn't sitting underneath the fire, probably would have burned my boat down. So stay tuned for that. But let's hop right into it. First topic, spearfishing dangers. Now, I've been spearfishing for about 6 years and come across a lot of different dangers and a lot of different avenues and all sorts of things. I did not ever get professionally trained to be a spearfisherman. There's not really many people that can teach you spearfishing. It's really just a lot of common sense for most of it. The freediving aspect you can get professional training on is something I intend on doing. There's a lot that I know I could learn from that. Something I recommend you do as well if you're able to. But spearfishing itself is just an inherently dangerous sport. I mean, come on, you're out in the ocean, you're putting blood in the water, you're messing with all sorts of animals down in the water. At least if you're me, you're definitely trying to mess with them. And most of all, the most dangerous thing is shallow water blackouts. And that's my first topic under the spearfishing dangers, is a shallow water blackout. In my Epicmentary episode 2, Southern California, I actually spent a few minutes talking about it, and I get my only ever shallow water blackout on camera. It's not quite from my point of view perspective, but I am holding the camera while I'm blacking out, and I was solo diving. It was a pretty scary experience. I was just talking to a guy actually who just watched the video and was saying how I should take the course, which I said, keep watching. I get to that. But anyway, so yes, shallow water blackouts, as my video will discuss and as I'll discuss here, is basically just an underwater faint. It's you've been down too long, and it usually happens. It's called a shallow water blackout. You can black out on the bottom, but it's actually pretty rare. Usually what happens is you go down a little too deep for a little too long, and especially on the way back up, maybe something happens, maybe you got that big fish. It's usually a circumstance. It usually doesn't happen on a boring dive. It didn't happen for me. I shot a fish, really a little sand bass, I think is what it was. And I just took too long trying to get it up off the bottom rather than letting my reel do it, because I was being a little lazy really with it. And just before I hit the surface, I felt, the vision started closing in. And you're only so aware of it, but that that voice in the back of your head is saying like, this is bad. You are messing up right now. So shallow water blackout is definitely one of the most dangerous things. I've had other instances, where I came up to the surface and just was down a little too long, but didn't have anything close to this. Anyone who's spearfished has done that. And, it hurts a little bit. It hurts in that way that holding your breath for too long does. But you get over it and you're fine. And, you're really kind of stretching your lungs out a little bit. But shallow water blackout really isn't safe. It's the number one way spearfishermen die. Not sharks, not propellers, not none of these other topics I'm going to cover in a moment as well. It can definitely help to have a spearfishing buddy, for sure. It's been the difference in life and death for many, many, many people, which is great and is a reason to dive with people. However, I obviously go spearfishing solo all the time, and that's because I can't always get somebody to go out with me. And if I waited to have a dive buddy for every one of my dives, I would probably have 1/10 of the dives that I do. Most of my dives are solo because I can't always find somebody. And even when I do go diving with somebody, a lot of times we split up. The only time I really like to have somebody right there next to me, right there with me, is if we're diving a deep spot. And when I say deep, I mean like if I'm doing around 70 feet. There's plenty of Spearos out there, and all around the world that, they could scoff at 70 feet and they'd be like, nope, we'll be waiting for even deeper depths. And there's plenty of people that get scared at much shallower depths, that always want somebody around them for everything. But generally speaking, and I've dove with a lot of people, everybody feels pretty comfortable just kind of going off here and there. But yeah, those deeper dives, so you can really push yourself and, know you have your buddy there at the surface watching for you. Because don't forget, the water is not always clear. I've done buddy dives for people where they were going down and they were leaving my vision range, and they would come up, 30 feet away from me because they kind of dive like a V, at the top of the V and then go down to their dive and come back up. So shallow water blackouts, major danger. Watch out for it. Do what you can to mitigate the risk. If you are going to be diving at your limit, and that's just it. I don't solo dive at my limit. I solo dive well before that. I give myself plenty of time. I've kind of rehearsed muscle memory of cutting my line, whatever I have to do, because no fish, no amount of gear, not even your boat, is worth your life, So it's just a big thing to watch out for. Next topic in the spearfishing dangers, sharks. Everybody wants to know about sharks. It's the number one question I probably get asked. Aren't you afraid of sharks? Have you ever, this and that? Just to get it out on the table real quick, I've had 3 encounters with great white sharks while spearfishing. First one in Monterey, California. Second one on the east coast of South Africa, about 100 miles south of the Mozambique border. And then the third and last one was off of Cape Agulhas, the southernmost point of Africa. The one in Monterey was by far the closest, where it sort of looked at me. I was probably maybe 30 feet away. It seemed to look a little bit further because the water was really murky. At that time, really green. If that had been like the Bahamas, 30 feet would have felt very close. But anyway, so sharks are a bit of a concern, but I've come to really kind of enjoy them. Most recently in the Bahamas, I got to have a dive with a great hammerhead. It was around 9 or so feet tall. It's hard to gauge, really. But yeah, when I was swimming next to him, I had my hand outstretched. I could see that, from the top of his hammer to the back of his fin, was about the same as me with my long blades on. So I'm 6 foot, stretch the arm out, it gives me a couple feet, and plus the fins out the back. So it was probably, right around 9 feet, maybe a couple inches more. But anyway, I enjoy diving with the sharks. The Bahamas is the only place that the Bahamas and obviously South Africa and Australia are the places where I found the sharks to be the fiercest, but the Bahamas are by far the worst. It's these reef sharks, not even the bull shark. Bull sharks, I have an easier time getting away from my fish than these little reef sharks. When I say little, I mean like they don't really get big. I don't think they really get too much bigger than 100 pounds. They're usually between 50 and 100 pounds if I had to guess. But they'll take a piece of you. They absolutely will. If you're not on it, if you're not watching them, I end up stabbing them regularly when I'm out there. And the reason for the Bahama sharks being so aggressive is that there's been too many Spearos in their waters that are too afraid of the sharks. They spear a fish, the shark comes over to say, hey, what's going on? And they just drop the fish. And it teaches the sharks, hey, these humans are a great source of food. Then they come across guys like me. I have never lost a fish to a shark. I'm a little bit dumb about that, admittedly. But yeah, I mean, when I was most recently in the Bahamas a few months back on this motor yacht, I speared, it was a little rosy grouper. I think they're called strawberry grouper. I think it's called strawberry grouper. Cute little grouper, very tasty. It's a fish I like to eat whole, actually. Bake the whole thing and then, kind of get the meat off of it that way. And so not a huge fish. And one or two sharks I can handle. These reef sharks, when there's 3 and more, it becomes a crowd. And then each one takes its turn, and they start coordinating, and really they're competing with each other. So that's something that I get pretty obviously nervous about, because they're coming in at my blind spots and they're pressuring me to give up my fish, which I think I know when I need to, but that wasn't the situation too. And, what I ended up doing instead is I put the grouper up onto my pole spear, and I lift my pole spear out of the water like a flagpole, and I just swim it back to the boat that way. And it keeps my body really high in the water, because they don't want to be at the very surface of the water. They want to be from underneath you, where they can keep a better eye on you. So that worked pretty good. Was able to get away from them on that. Other parts in the world, I've encountered, like I said, bull sharks, tiger sharks. Actually, tiger sharks only in the Bahamas for me. And of those encounters, first one was a big pregnant one. And tiger sharks and great whites are interesting in that they're the only sharks I found that don't move for people or for me. Other sharks I usually end up intimidating either without trying, by just trying to get close and getting some footage and being a little too confident, or trying to get them to move because I don't want them in my area. I want that to be my hunting area. So I'm going to compete with them and conflict with them intentionally. But yeah, obviously great whites don't move for you, and it's been my experience that tiger sharks usually don't move. I threw lobster heads off the back of the yacht that I was on in the Bahamas this year, a few months ago, and I guess a little bit of footage of the tiger shark, because obviously I jumped in to get footage, and the tiger shark was swimming away, actually with the lobster head in its mouth, not the fish carcasses I had thrown over, which I thought was interesting. I didn't think of them as going after lobster, but to each their own. That one wasn't huge though, but that one spooked out really quick. There was still food down, and just other nurse sharks. Maybe a reef shark was behind the boat, and definitely a big barracuda that just wouldn't leave me alone. But anyway, yeah. And then real quick on barracudas, I have teeth marks on my spear gun from one in Australia. That is because I speared it first, so I did have it coming. And I actually got really great footage on that I'll be putting in the Epic Memory episode. I believe that'll be, 5 will be Australia. So it'll be a little while longer. But, yeah, I got to have an interesting little fight with that one. Otherwise, barracudas are real wussies. They really, I mean, you go at them, you kind of stab at them. I don't know if I've really ever gotten to stab one. They usually stay out of my range just before that. They'll flare their teeth and stuff, but I've never had one do anything. They do come around to try to check out my fish, but I think they know I'll kill them if they come within my range. I've definitely tried to, just to let them know who's boss, but they stay away. So anyway, sharks aren't really that big of a problem. I think they're just more cool to spearfish with. In California, I do put my fish that I've speared onto my stringer on my belt, because the only shark out there to worry about in Northern California and Central California is the great white, which it's just so rare, and it's not going after your fish. If it decides it wants to bite you, it's biting you for you, which they usually let go, but usually you die anyway. But anyway, it's just part of the game. Sharks are much more of a mental fight than a physical one. What I mean by that is, I've been in places where the water's murky, and the kelp is, up, and there's a big stretch between me and the next kelp patch. And I'm just swimming over deep, murky water, and man, it's not a fun feeling. The Bahamas is cool because you can see so clearly in it, and many other places as well. But I really don't mind the murky water. That's what I learned how to spearfish in when I started in Santa Cruz, California, and Monterey. So anyway, so to close out the shark topic, really not that big of a deal. They're usually as afraid of you as you are of them. Be confident if you encounter them. Don't be running away. Look at them, look straight at them, let them know that like you're there, and there'll be a fight if they try to start anything. And it's always worked out great for me. Anyway, moving on to other spearfishing dangers, other boats and propellers. This one scares me more than the sharks do. Obviously, like I said, shallow water blackouts is my first concern. Other boats and propellers. I remember I was off of Santa Catalina Island in Southern California, and I was dragging a bright yellow, I mean, as yellow as you can be, plastic kayak behind me on my breakaway line. So it's probably about, I was pretty close. I was maybe 20 feet away from it. And a like 50 some odd foot motor yacht almost hit me. And I'm like 20 feet from an island too. And the captain looks down and he didn't see me. He didn't see anything that was going on. And I yelled at him, and I think he yelled back, they were like, oh shit, we almost hit this guy. And then they're like, oh, where's your dive flag? And it's like, okay, yeah, I guess I should have had a dive flag, but it wouldn't have made a difference, So other boats definitely scare me. Pretty much a year after that, I found out this woman there died spearfishing, very close to where I was. I think, maybe a couple hundred yards away, because a motorboat went over and just, she went to come up, because if you're free diving, you have to come up. You can hear the boats, but you have to come up. And that was it. The boat clipped her head, and that's all she wrote. The clearer the water, for sure, you have a little bit of a chance, but it's really hard to gauge where it's coming from. And it absolutely scares the hell out of me. Other boaters, especially obviously, center console motorboaters, they're not aware of dive flags. A lot of them don't know what it is. Some of them come closer to see what it is, which is the opposite of what they're supposed to do. Gotta calm down. Anyway, so yeah, if you're a boater hearing this, let's see, we've got the reddish or orange dive flag that's got a white stripe through the top left to the right side. Doesn't matter though, red with a white stripe. That's a dive flag, I believe, in the U.S. And then in other countries, like Australia and such, I believe they recognize the blue one with a white stripe, or might have an X on it actually. Not sure, I haven't been there in a little while, but that is what it's, what you're supposed to be avoiding. And I forget what the law says you're supposed to be, it's like 100, 200 yards, something like that. But why not stay 500? Why not just not ruin somebody's day spearfishing? Not even to not hit them, but just don't get close so you don't, ruin their, scare the fish away and such. Other thing along with that is the propeller of your own boat. That is something to be cautious of. You have a dive buddy who's up in the boat watching over you. They need to know, when they can't see you, engine needs to be in neutral. I've been boaty for many people, and I feel like I was taught by a few others pretty early on. Because I started out with, I didn't really even get to spearfish off of a boat until 3 years into spearfishing. I had always done a shore dive or gone from a kayak. But the propeller is, it'll chew you up. The second it hits you, it's going to cut through. Propeller wounds are absolutely nasty. So moving on, other spearfishing dangers, tangling in your gear. When I was spearfishing in the Bahamas, there was this really cool cave that, probably went back for miles, but it was just loaded with monster cuberas, a real spear fisherman's dream. My biggest concern spearfishing this particular one was that I would hit the cubera with the pole spear, and it would go instead of back down the cave, which would still be tough, it would go out of the cave and then feel the yank and then go back inside or something like that. But either way, that it would wrap me up in my gear, in my shooting line or my reel line. And reel line and shooting line, you cannot break it with your hands. Certain fish can because they're crazy strong and powerful. A marlin, probably even these cuberas could probably break. There are some tough fish, but you cannot. And this is why I always dive with a dive knife. This is probably, along with shallow water blackouts, probably more than the sharks or the propellers. I worry about tangling in gear, or God forbid, I tangle in a net down below or something like that. Being held under very much so scares me. Although I do frequently dive into caves. The caves don't bug me. I don't mind the claustrophobic spaces. I'm pretty flexible. So I've never had a problem getting back out of a cave. It's never been an issue. If my shoulders can fit, I know I'm good to go. I'm able to slip my fins off pretty easily. I got very lucky with my fins that they never fall off, but I can take them off with just my heels. But tangling in your gear is something to be very concerned about, depending on what you're spearfishing. For instance, a good float line, which I really like diving with a float line when I can. Obviously, I can't really do it in the Bahamas because I can't use a spear gun there. But a float line is good because it doesn't knot easily. It's a thicker cordage of a Mine is sort of like a polypropylene, or it's probably more like a plastic, but it's very smooth, and I can't imagine it tangling around me. If it did though, it's got Spectra inside of it, and Spectra is crazy strong, but it's also very soft and very easy to cut. My knife would go straight through it very easily, so it's one of the other fears. Other dangers of spearfishing, getting swept out to sea. I've never had this problem, but I've heard about people that dive Indonesia and that dive Hawaii talking a lot about this, the currents being so strong there. The closest I can relate is the Bahamas. They have large flat sections with islands that just make these tight channels, and the current just rips through them. I've kind of always had fun with those because they are between islands, and really you just get shot out a couple hundred yards and you just swim off to the side, and then you follow back up towards the island, and then you got to navigate that river of current again. So it hasn't really been an issue for me. You really just got to think and plan it out. But like I said, other places like Hawaii and Indonesia, it sounds like the currents work much different there, and they will go for further out durations. There's not really a chance for me getting swept up in a rip tide, a rip current, anything like that, because I'm never near a beach. I'm always offshore. And if I was in a beach and got swept out, I would, just kind of kick around. So that's something I think you can just kind of be smart about. I kind of covered a bit about solo diving, with the buddies. If you are buddy diving, it is great. It's a great thing to do. It's also good to just have somebody else there to help out with the fish, somebody to high five when you get the fish. Buddy diving is great if you can get somebody. But again, that's a risk that I take, and I know I'm taking it. So all in all, you've got a few risks there for spearfishing, but it's still worth it. I absolutely love the sport. Wouldn't trade it for anything else. Moving on to the second topic, sailing. I've actually only been sailing for like 3 years now. I learned in Santa Cruz, California, got a mentor very quickly, and was able to progress in the sport or hobby, if you will, fairly quickly. And because I learned from a cruiser, I feel like race sailors are not nearly as safe as cruisers are for a number of reasons. And it's inherently more dangerous to be racing than to be just cruising. So I'm kind of only covering the cruising side of this, not the racing side. But anyway, so when you're sailing and cruising, falling over is probably the number one that I worry about. The idea of, the autopilot being on and you go to check something and you fall off and you realize you have missed the boat and it is going to keep sailing and you have no chance of catching after it. That absolutely worries me. I think everybody is prone to their own sorts of fears in their own ways. For instance, many people are very afraid of sharks. I am not. I am actually, if I had to pick one, I would say driving to the supermarket. I don't like other cars and other drivers. People are on their phones and such. And statistically, my fear is much more backed up. It's around 6 people a year die from sharks. Feel free to Google how many people die a year from a car crash. Just in the US alone, or in the world. I know it's over 100,000 a year that die in car crashes. So being afraid of sharks versus being afraid of a car crash, it's a kind of a little bit unreasonable. But for me on the sailboat, I am very afraid of falling off. That's something I definitely worry about. These things can be mitigated by obviously not sailing into anything too crazy, which I haven't entirely succeeded at so far. I have got myself into a few pickles, but no one's ever gotten hurt. That's been a major rule of mine. I believe that is rule number 1 on my boat. And the boat has stayed in one piece. So I have gotten a little fortunate on that. When I do solo sail, because I solo sail quite often, I love it. It's just really a great thing. I do have jack lines going up my boat, which are complete. Jack line is, you put a harness on and then you should have 2 lines going off of that harness with clips. And the idea being that you can always clip off to something and then undo the previous clip. So you are always clipped in if anything happens. So it'll definitely be uncomfortable if I get knocked off the boat. If I'm going up the foredeck during a storm and I get knocked off, it'll be uncomfortable and I'll probably end up breaking one of my lifelines as the line goes over it. My body weight tensions on it. It might not though. But it doesn't really matter whether I break it or not. It puts me close enough to the deck of the boat that I can scrounge my way back up. And, I just did a episode on being crew. If you haven't listened to it, I'd recommend it. And one of the things I recommend, if you're going to be on a sailboat, you need to be physically fit. And this is why. You can mitigate a lot of these things I'm going to cover for the dangers of sailing just by being a little bit more physically fit. So falling off, pretty simple to avoid in that regard. I've never clipped in my cockpit during a bad storm because my cockpit is so enclosed with so much stuff. You'd have to get thrown and a lot of things would have to break before you could. I mean, a lot of things. So it's just a very tight spot in there. It's just not really possible. And I would find it to be more of a danger to get in my way, for properly handling the boat. So that's how I handle all those things. Getting a hand caught in a winch or getting caught in the windlass while you're anchoring or unanchoring, that is a real threat. And that is something I very much so worry about the crew that I take on. It's something I make a point to teach them because people who have never sailed before don't understand the power in a winch or windlass. And I mean, it's a nice, calm, sunny day. There's like 5 knots of wind. You can barely even feel it. We go to anchor and I'll throw the anchor out and I won't tie it off to anything. I'll let the boat pick up a little bit of speed. They don't realize how much force 5 knots puts on a boat when you try to stop it. I mean, I don't have a huge boat, but I have a big enough boat that it will crush your hand. So that's a very real thing. Never have your hand between the winch and the line. It's as simple as that. Sort of like never cut towards yourself. Always cut away from yourself. Really simple things like this are very easy ways to reduce or even eliminate certain risks to yourself. And it's a good habit to get into. Set these muscle memories for yourself. Pretty much most all these things can be done by muscle memory, of how to handle it. Sharks, on the other hand, you got to read their body language a little, but everything else, pretty much muscle memory. Other dangers on the sailboat, the boom. Why did it get the name the boom? Because when you go to tack or, God forbid, you do an accidental jibe, a thing's going to come screaming across. I actually haven't gotten a wallop on my from my boom yet. My crew has managed to, kind of bop their head on it, but everybody's been pretty good. If I'm doing the tacks or whatnot, I'm very aware of who's where, and I also set the the topping lift that will hold how high up I want my boom. I usually set that so it's overhead level when you're standing and looking up over my dodger. So it's kind of an easy way to avoid that. But again, this and the winch, these are things you need to teach whoever you have on board to watch out for. Seasickness. I do consider this to be a little bit of a danger. More so if anything has gotten people out of sailing, it's got to be seasickness. I mean, it sucks. And I do get it. I've had a few bad head injuries in my time, and the last one kind of really put me out. And I think more or less because of that. Like I didn't used to get seasick, but after that one, I do get seasick, mostly if I haven't been sailing for a while. And really, eventually it will happen to anybody in the worst of circumstances. But the more veteran of a sailor you are, and some people are just flat out immune to them, very lucky. I envy them. But yeah, it's something that you do got to watch out for. It becomes dangerous if you're doing a passage for a long duration and you're continuously seasick. There's tons of remedies, things you can do. But once you actually get seasick, it can be pretty tough to unget seasick. For instance, my favorite is Dramamine. Dramamine, however, only works when you take it well before getting seasick. It has to be in your system. You can't be throwing it up. Dramamine, however, usually makes you very drowsy. But if I had to pick between being sleepy and being seasick, I'll pick sleepy every time. I can still operate while being sleepy, and I can still operate while being seasick, but I'll enjoy the other one. So that's just seasickness right there. Running aground with your sailboat. Not so much a personal danger, but that is a danger, obviously, to your boat, to your home, to everything else. It's a major danger on your wallet. Sailing in general is a danger on your wallet if you're getting a boat, just so you know. But running aground is something I do worry about very often, getting stranded somewhere. Usually, if you run aground, it means that there's land nearby. So if you did sink your boat, at least you're gonna be able to paddle over or swim over wherever you have to go to. But it is something to still consider. Charts, and I use Navionics pretty much to sail everywhere. I've never used paper charts, with the exception of the Bahamas Explorer charts. I really like those, but I use those more of a reference along with my GPS, along with Navionics, and then again along with just Dead Reckoning. Those three seem to work pretty good for me. Everybody does run aground eventually. I went to teach my friend Abby here how to sail the other day, and we ran aground for a few moments in the ICW. But actually, that's more bumping the bottom. Running aground usually means like you are hard aground. Closest I've been to harder ground was trying to get into the Mud Keys on the deadest low tide. The tide was coming up, so when we ran aground, I was like, bah, no worries, we'll be out of here in an hour or so. We'll just chill, wait a minute, threw the anchor out and just kind of hung out. So yeah, depending on how you do that. But sailing, I would say, is the most adventurous way to travel. Though it is fraught with danger, I wouldn't necessarily call it the most dangerous way to travel. But it is fraught with its own dangers. So anyway, moving on, number 3, kiteboarding and many other water and board sports. I've been kiteboarding for just barely a year now. Had a lot of fun, absolutely love the sport, and integrating it with my sailing and cruising and spearfishing is a ton of fun. I have surfed for about 7 years, and I've always been some sort of a waterman otherwise. So I'm kind of referring to this in a general category of board sports, as well as as well as kiteboarding on its own. Board sports are great, surfing and whatnot. Really, the only danger to that one is if you purl, meaning when you're coming down to catch a wave, the front edge of your board, the tip of your board, gets caught under the water and you get flung forward. Just don't go head first. Make sure you give it a roll or something like that. I've also done a lot of snowboarding, and same thing. When you're learning how to snowboard, they actually teach you how to fall, which I think is very important. The other danger of surfing would be, your board coming back around and hitting you. That is something to worry about as well. And again, when you do take a fall doing these sports, you want to be kicking and moving away from them. Not terribly dangerous, but something to watch out for. Kiteboarding is certainly a very dangerous sport. The less you know what you're doing. It's one of those things where you can kind of teach yourself how to spearfish. You can definitely teach yourself how to sail. You can definitely teach yourself how to surf. Teaching yourself how to surf is a great thing. But kiteboarding, you really need somebody to just at least teach you the basics so you don't kill yourself. For instance, when you're learning, you need to have absolutely nothing downwind of you on the full 180-degree spectrum. Meaning that when you loop the kite, not if, but when, because when you're learning, you loop the kite, we're talking some serious horsepower that is going to yank you. You will get yanked. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And you're going to get yanked hard. If you do that in a shallow water environment with a sandbar that goes out, 3 feet is really ideal probably. You are going to skid across the water, get a face full of water, and then you are going to find your feet and you're going to stand up and you're going to keep flying the kite. That is how it's supposed to be done. If you decide to learn how to kite on a beach with maybe they've got some poles there or there's rocks nearby, you accidentally downloop the kite and you get sent, you're dead. You are dead if you go head first in those things. And that's the way it wants to carry your body. It's absolutely, I haven't been there, but I can just vividly imagine it, and it's a terrifying thing. So yeah, be very aware of that. Kiteboarding can be very dangerous on that. Kiteboarding can be very dangerous if you get tangled in your lines or if you tangle somebody else. Kiteboarding is one of those things that it's very out there. Everybody can see it. It's a very cool sport for that others can watch you and really enjoy. It's a great spectator sport, But if there's other surfers in the water, other kiteboarders, I had my good buddy Chad when we were learning drop the kite on me. Well, it wasn't too big of a deal. I was able to kind of push it up and over, and I kind of dove down a little bit. Could have been bad though. And then I think like a week ago, some lady who was very new to spearfishing, very new to kiteboarding and shouldn't have been so high up in the pocket, was up above me, and I went to do a tack and go back the other way, and all of a sudden I realized her kite was going to either collide with me or tangle with the kite. There was no avoiding it, and it happens. But this one was very easily avoidable by a newbie kiteboarder not being where she was. I had tangled up. I considered, any good new kiteboarding harness has a line cutter in the harness that you can quickly grab. I briefly considered cutting her lines, but I knew I was okay. I wasn't in any pain, so I quickly dismissed it as it would have been a bit of a jerk move. It would have been a very big jerk move, actually. Some other guys helped me. I was able to get up and out of it, but I have heard stories of people downlooping their kite and there being a surfer in the water. I don't know the names, I don't know the specifics, but I know there was one guy nearby me here in Fort Pierce. I think he was on the north side, and this happened, and it caught some 13-year-old kid who was surfing. It caught his ear or something like that. And the kite lines, by the way, are made of, I think, Dyneema, pretty stringent stuff, tensile strength of steel. It will cut flesh, absolutely. So the the imagining wrapping the line around your body and then putting tension on the kite is absolutely terrifying. So that's a really big thing to worry about, really big, dangerous thing. Another danger of kiteboarding would be the board coming around and hitting you, losing your gear and getting stranded. So if you're kiting and there's an offshore breeze, which is very dangerous, and your gear, fails and you're not able to kite yourself back over, you have to ditch your gear. And that segues me into kiteboarding is very dangerous on the wallet. It will chew up your bank account. It is not a cheap sport. So what I like about surfing, even spearfishing over kiteboarding is kiteboarding, you can't go without things. With surfing, you can get a beat up board, you can use some rope for a leash. You don't need anything else. A pair of shorts, that's it. Kiteboarding, you need a kite. We're looking at about $1,000 right there. Sometimes more, sometimes less. You need a bar. You're looking with lines, and you're looking at anywhere from $300 to $500 or $600 right there. So let's call that $1,500. You need a board. You're looking at usually around $700. And then you're looking at a pump. It's going to set you back, 20 or so. And then you need a harness. So before you're done with all of it, I'm not good at math, but you're looking at around $2,000 and more just to get into the sport. So it's very, very hard on the wallet. And the last thing I'll touch on for the dangers of kiteboarding is shark attacks. Super rare, very rarely ever fatal. I've had my board get bumped by all sorts of things. I think it was tarpon, maybe some spinner sharks and whatnot. Kind of cool, really, but it's a super rare thing to have happen. Although actually there was a fatal attack here in Fort Pierce, or I think Stewart maybe, a few years ago, but it does happen. It's just very rare. So anyway, moving on to the fourth section, backpacking internationally. I went backpacking for, it was supposed to be 6 months. I ended up going for 18. Had a lot of fun, ran into some trouble for sure, learned some lessons. But generally what I'm going to say on backpacking these days is it's pretty safe. There's tons of hostels. Everybody knows what's up. You've got reviews on things. Being able to have reviews so you don't go to some dodgy hostel or worse is really a great thing. It can be frustrating if you own a business and you get like a bad Yelp review, but man, there is a good side to that for people that are traveling. So that's a big thing. I generally just found it to be a safe thing. If you just kept your nose out of trouble, if you weren't looking for trouble, you'd be safe. Obviously I found some trouble. I got clipped by a car when I was in Cape Town, actually a very nice part of Cape Town too. I got clipped by a car. The guy got up, we squared up to argue and whatnot. And, after a few awkward minutes, he ended up throwing a punch. And, some of you may know I have a knack of losing my front teeth. And I think this was like the 5th time I lost my front teeth. They got a little knocked out, but they weren't staying in anyway. It was a fake pair of front teeth anyway. And so they were bound to come out. So yeah, things like that do happen. I didn't have any theft problems when I was traveling because I kind of always kept a good head on my shoulders about it. I don't drink, so I was never drunk. So I wasn't really a target for pickpockets. And I was kind of just always aware about it. I'm not a huge guy, but I'm not tiny. So I think that, if you are a pickpocket, you don't want to pick somebody who looks like they're faster than you are and bigger than you are. So that may have, prevented a few things there. And I didn't go to too terribly dangerous a place. Cape Town actually is definitely a dangerous place. Funny enough, it's a huge destination, but crime is rampant there. Very, very dangerous depending on where you go. I remember coming back from, I think, watching the fireworks on New Year's. I think that was 2018, beginning of 2018. And there was just some guy and he just started following us and, asking for money and would not leave. And it definitely was one of those, like, what would have happened if we didn't just duck into there. There's a nice hotel that we just ducked into. And, then he, eventually got sidetracked and went away. So anyway, but backpacking really is pretty safe. Just be smart, look ahead to where you're going. There is a dangerous place in every country. Obviously, if you're going to Afghanistan, a few more dangerous places than safe places there, but there really isn't a country you can't go to that you can't have a great safe time in, is my belief. It doesn't matter how far off the grid you really want to go to. But let's take a look at the USA here. LA, Los Angeles is very safe, but are there bad neighborhoods are there ghettos that you would never want to go to? Absolutely. Use your head, be smart about it. It doesn't take too much more than that. Hostels really are pretty good place. I'd say the biggest danger there is friggin' bed bugs. I did get bed bugs when I was in Rome, actually, in Italy. If I could remember the name of the place, I would say it. I think I used every one of my Gmail accounts to write them a bad review. They handled it really badly. They tried to just kick me out because they thought it was me, and I was like, there's a ton of bed bugs here. Like, I couldn't have brought this, man. I couldn't have packed this many in my suitcase if I tried. Happened once, washed everything, showered up. I've never had bed bugs since. Probably one of my other fears and phobias, to be aware of. So that does happen. Some people that go to hostels will not sleep on the blankets. With the bedding provided, they will put a sleeping bag on top of them and sleep over top. That's not a bad idea, actually, because the bed bugs, the linens would get washed and the bed bugs would be inside the mattress. So it would at least take them a little while to get up and out to you, theoretically. But that being said, actually a lot of hostels won't allow you to do that, is what I've also heard, because sometimes the linens people are bringing has the bed bug. So anyway, really not that much to worry about. If you're thinking about traveling and something you want to do, there's nothing, depending on where you want to go, as long, I went to New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, and I hit Dubai and went up to Europe for a while. I mean, those are all great places. There's no story that should deter you from going to at least some part of those countries. And I should mention, by the way, that New Zealand I felt super safe in. Loved that country. Can't say enough good things. Australia too, for that matter. The people is what I consider about safety. Animals don't really bug me. It's the people, and I felt like I was very safe there. But anyway, so be smart, about everything, but it's pretty good. Van life, section 5 here, van life. I have lived in vans when I first moved to California when I was 19. I was temporarily homeless but not vanless, so I consider that to be sort of the start of my van life. I lived for my entire 5 months in New Zealand in a backpacker minivan, and that's when I realized how great a minivan can be if you actually make it livable. And then when I went from California across the country to find and buy my sailboat, I built my own stealth camper minivan out of a Honda Odyssey. And I loved that thing. It was fantastic. I highly rate van life. If you're thinking about traveling, either traveling to a country, getting a minivan that's already, in New Zealand, they are a dime a dozen. There is so many of these backpacker minivans like I got. I mean, I can only imagine the vehicle that I was in has been traded 10 times since I left, But there's a million videos to do on this. Don't feel like you need to go get a Sprinter van. I mean, you're defeating the whole purpose of a van life, in my opinion, if you go get a Sprinter van. I mean, yes, it's cool. You have a ton of room and you can do whatever to the inside of this blank slate that is the Sprinter van. But the money you're going to spend on that is ridiculous. And the time to refit it and all these things. Van life, you need a bed. You need to be able to open up the back and do some cooking in the back. That's pretty much it, in my opinion. I showered mostly actually in rivers. I used Dr. Bronner's hemp soap. It's nice and good for the environment, so nobody can yell at me for that one. And I found that the route I was taking across the northern section of the continental U.S., every highway pretty much was built near a river, which was really convenient. So I'd just be like, oh, river. I brought some water with me. I brought, I think I had 10 gallons in these jugs. I never used it. I got across the entire country. I think I would use it to wash my feet off once in a while. That was it. But the van life, though, going back to the safety aspect of it, very safe in my opinion. You can blend in with other traffic very easily. You can park anywhere, and that's probably where the danger arises, in that you might park in the wrong place and somebody might mess with your vehicle in that way. But it's pretty rare, and there's just not too much unsafe I can say about it. If somebody's looking to travel, I first recommend van life to them. Yeah, for a lot of reasons. And I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this in every one of my other podcasts. So anyway, moving on from that, section 6 here, RV living. I lived in an RV for 2 years. After I got done going around the world, I got back to San Diego, bought an RV, did a few things to it, and then took it from San Diego all the way up to Alaska, spearfished the king salmon world record, which I think I still hold, and then came back down to Santa Cruz, California, where I parked it in the middle of a redwood forest and ran an electrical cord to it and an internet cable to it. And that's how I afforded my sailboat, because I lived in there for free for the next year, worked my butt off and saved a ton of money and was able to get into a sailboat. So that's my experience with RVs. Obviously, I would talk more about the moving aspect of them. I didn't like them as much compared to the van because they're just not actually as mobile. You can't fit into parking spaces usually, this and that. So the danger aspect sides of RV living is pretty minimal. It's mostly dangerous on your wallet. It does cost a chunk of change both to get the RV and to, maintain it. So your biggest danger is when you're actually moving. I did have an incident where it was the wire connecting my electrical brakes to the RV was simply just plugged out of the socket. And it was when I was driving down, unfortunately, I wasn't told how steep this section would be. I think it was on the Lost Coast or Forgotten Coast. I think they call it the Lost Coast of California, just north, like the northernmost regions of California. Beautiful area, but again, I wasn't told how steep it was going to be. I didn't realize the decline, and I couldn't tell the difference on the tongue, of the truck. But I ended up heating up my truck brakes pretty good because of this. That's the closest I could think of the danger that would have come. Brakes ended up being fine. I think I changed I bought the rotors and the pads to do it myself to change it. It would have taken me an afternoon. I think I changed the brake pads because one of the pads was just getting low. Everything else was fine. So it really wasn't that dangerous, but I look at it as it could have been a dangerous circumstance. Once I did finally, I got some professional RV repairmen to come fix it. They got underneath it and they're like, "Oh dude, there's a wire missing. Like this wire just got unplugged." And I was like, "Oh, how did that happen?" That was it. Besides that, dangers of an RV lifestyle, potentially people breaking in, but it's really rare. I can't think of a story that I've actually heard of that. It's possible. But out of all the RVers, and RV lifestyle is in a lot of ways kind of like the sailing and cruising lifestyle. Obviously you're restricted to the roads, but similar in a lot of ways. So yeah, there's not too much more I can really say on that. There are electrical and plumbing things that can go wrong, but they're all actually really easy to fix. I'm not particularly savvy on either, and I had problems with both. I was able to fix both. So RV lifestyle, really not that dangerous. Highly recommend it though. I highly recommend it for certain people. If you're younger and especially if you don't have as much money, backpack and or the van or both. Really good way to do it. So anyway, moving on to a different topic here. Let's actually switch it up. Number 7, who you travel with or going solo. I've kind of been doing solo adventures since I was like 8. I was a kid growing up in upstate New York, first in this little town called Argyle. And then when I was, I think, 14, I moved with my dad to Greenwich, New York, just one town over. Slightly more developed, but anyway. And I'd always been outside. I'd always been doing things. So I was very used to doing things on my own. And that eventually obviously translated to me spearfishing solo. And then as I got older, I started I didn't know it was free climbing. I was just doing it, but free climbing these big waterfalls and stuff. And looking back on it, very dangerous things. I could have slipped and it just I would have been dead. Nobody there. Nobody would have really known besides where my backpack was. So that's kind of traveling solo, but who you travel with can actually be a little bit dangerous. If it's somebody you've known for a while, if somebody you just met, especially if you just met them at a hostel, make sure they're good to go. If you just met them at the hostel and, let's say for instance, you're in a foreign country, say you're in like South Africa and you just met somebody and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm a local to this area, this and that." Sometimes you can run into some scams that way. It definitely nearly happened to me when I first got to Cape Town. That's when I first started staying in hostels in South Africa. And it just seemed a little shady to me. I felt more comfortable kind of being on my own. I think then I met some woman from Alabama. There's no faking that accent. It was gorgeous. And yeah, I did a little bit of traveling with her and whatnot. But really, more so what I mean by who you travel can get you into trouble, I'm probably more thinking of you bring the wrong friend who likes to get a little rowdy, likes to have a couple more drinks than they should, and they get you into trouble that way. Or, just dragging you into a fight, dragging you into their drama, whatever. So become a good judge of character, or suffer the consequences is what I would just advise for who you travel with. Eventually, while you're traveling, you're going to meet somebody you don't like or somebody that doesn't like you. That's life. Don't hang on it. Move on to greener pastures. I've definitely met a few unsavory characters in my travels. And if you'll notice on my blogs and Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, whatever, I don't really talk about it much because it's not really worth mentioning. you simply are going to meet people that don't like you. It doesn't matter if you're traveling or not. It's just part of life. So just don't hang your head and kind of move on. Section 8 here, losing friends and not being able to return to a social norm. I'm kind of rolling this all up into dangers of the adventure lifestyle as well. In the fact that it is something you stand to lose. If you go and travel, for instance, I did for 18 months on end. I had already been traveling for a while. I'd already moved from the East Coast to the West Coast and then down to San Diego and things like that. But it is something, when I left San Diego to go travel around the world, I had a good friend group there. And I didn't lose them as friends. I've maintained many of the friendships, but there definitely were some that I did lose. And as well, back in Greenwich, New York, there were some friends I had that simply, we're not together anymore, where we don't see each other, we're not able to hang out. And that is a very real danger to the adventure lifestyle. That's something you're considering, is you need to be able to say goodbye to your friends. It's great if they're friends that can come see you, that when you go back and visit, you can see them. But there are a lot of friends that you'll discover that you have that they're friends with you on the basis of they can see you, that they can be around you. That's just who they are. It's just how it goes, and that's cool. I've definitely developed into a person where I'm going to be friends with somebody as long as we can stay in touch. As long as we can message once in a while, and then hopefully we can meet up. Hopefully they can come on the sailboat. Hopefully I'm passing through their area or whatever. But it's a real danger. And then sort of on that same one, when you do go back to your hometown, say you spent your whole life in your hometown and you go sailing for a year, especially if you do that, at 18, 19, 20, those are formative years of your life when you're still figuring out who you are. You'll find that your friend group, it's hard to change when you're around a friend group because you have your own little spot. You're the funny one. Maybe you're the one that gets riled up really easily. Maybe you're that friend that raids everybody else's refrigerator. I am that friend, by the way, just so you know. It's tough to move out of that. It's tough to grow in your hometown with your same friends. It really is. So when you travel, you will grow because every day you can reinvent yourself. You can be a whole different person every day. Obviously, I decided to be the same person throughout my travels, for better or for worse. But anyway, now you can decide who you want to be and you can really grow. And I think that's a great thing. But when you come back to your hometown, just be ready. Your friends might not accept that. They might not, and not intentionally. All this is kind of done subconsciously, but they might kind of want you to return to being that funny, silly, dumb one when instead you just got done traveling and you've become very cultured, very astute. And that can be a tough thing to adjust back to. So that's a danger to watch out for. Another danger is romantic relationships. For sure, I don't really do long distance relationships. So if I am dating a woman, we have some fun for a while and then I've got to go, I now have a sailboat, so that can be a little bit different, I suppose, but I'm in no hurry at this point to settle down. And for anybody else out there who's looking at traveling, but they have a girlfriend or boyfriend, it's something you have to consider. If you're planning on going and being, out there for months at a time, or you have somebody who's planning on being away from you for months at a time traveling, it might be best for you to let them go ahead of time. That's probably the emotionally smart thing to do. Just so that way there is, no worry of who was faithful and who wasn't. And it just gives you some freedom. And then when you do come back or they come back, if it's meant to be, you do get back together again. That's what I would really recommend for those things. But anyway, that pretty much sums up the losing friends and the social dangers of traveling, as I would say it. So moving on here to the 9th and last section, I'm going to talk about how I almost lost my sailboat the other week. So I'm sitting right in the cockpit of my sailboat with my sailing mentor and friend, Don Radcliffe. He taught me so much about sailing. He was so instrumental, and no doubt I would 100% not be where I am and probably not even have this boat. I probably would have went with a different one, and I'm very happy I went with this boat. So I'm sitting up in the cockpit. We're talking. He had just come to visit for a few days, and we're talking actually about my solar setup and my electrical system. And we're both remarking how safe solar is. I don't want to put a generator on my boat. I don't want to put a wind generator on my boat. Different ways to get electricity. And I'm just saying, man, I love solar. There's no moving parts. It's just so safe, yada, yada. And throughout this conversation, I can smell smoke. It was like burning plastic. And it just keeps wafting to us. And it's a clear, bright, sunny day out. It just rained a lot the day before. And then all of a sudden we both see something like hitting, falling down, and we realize the bimini's on fire kind of at the same time. A bimini is this, in my case, it's made out of umbrella, which I now know is very flammable. And it also releases these little burning plastic pieces. I got one to my shoulder, one to my finger, and the shoulder one is still healing. Man, burns take forever to heal. It wasn't very bad, it just takes forever. But anyway, I immediately jump up. I always have a water bottle on me, so I dump the water bottle and then head for the hose, and was able to put it out very quickly, but it was spreading fast, very, very fast. So we get the fire under control, make sure everything's unplugged. It was never plugged into my battery, kind of check everything else, calm down, and start to assess it. And after a couple hours, here is what we think had happened. First off, it was a flexible solar panel that definitely caused a fire, no doubt about it. You could see the places where it had shorted out. And here's the mistakes that I made on this. And there's probably at least one mistake made on the part of the manufacturer for this. But really it was my fault, pretty much entirely, obviously. So what I think had happened is I put the solar panels up on a flexible bimini, that's overshading the cockpit. And that had, moved around. And flexible solar panels are like a very stiff piece of paper, if you will. They are flexible, but they're not meant to be flexed every day. And I had secured them up there with paracord. It was really a great system for just a temporary thing. So if you need solar on your boat for 1 or 2 years, 2 years max, really more like 1 year, and you have a flexible bimini, you just, rig it up there with some paracord and then bring it down along the outsides. And it worked wonderful. That's how I did it for my past couple of years of cruising. But the solar panels did crack. And flexible ones, I've seen on other boats, do crack eventually, but they crack only on the outsides. These ones had cracked all the way through, like a piece of paper that I'd folded one too many times. And that's where the short had happened. And again, that's definitely my fault. I had actually looked at them recently and saw how cracked they were. And I had them disconnected from my boat, so I was like, oh, no worries. And by the way, there was 4 flexible 100-watt solar panels. And then behind them, on my dinghy davits, is one rigid solar panel is 300 watts. So that's what I had hooked up. So I had a total of 700 watts, and I had them all on a 24 volt, I'm trying to think, was I doing in series or parallel? But anyway, but I doubled up the voltage to give it 24 to match the big one in the back, and that's how I had it rigged up. So they were all still connected together, and that's what we think had happened, is that there wasn't a solenoid or solenoid. Basically, electricity is supposed to only flow out of a solar panel. We think that the combined power of all 700 watts had gone back up into that solar panel, along with the rain we had caused some shorting over time, and eventually that short just lit the bimini on fire. So that's what we think had happened. Pretty confident on it. If you're an electrical engineer, feel free to comment or message me. It's an interesting one for sure. Now here's the scary thing though. This could have just happened at any moment. I mean, there was no warning, there was no nothing. And that's what really, really scared me about it, that it just went off. I could have been anywhere else on the boat. I just happened to be right underneath it. I mean, that was and I am very lucky. This whole danger category I'm talking about with you guys, I want to highlight how lucky I get, how often. So that really scared me, just how randomly this decided to have happened. But it was absolutely preventable. If you have flexible solar panels and they're cracked, you should get new ones anyway. They're not even that expensive. Or if you're able to, you should be going to hard solar panels, rigid ones. They are much more efficient. You're going to get more power out of them anyway. A little more weight, and obviously they're rigid, so there's that. But yeah, so that's kind of what had happened. The other thing that really scared me was if the bimini had continued to catch on fire, it would have dropped down. I mean, somebody probably would have seen it and hopefully would have come over. Because, I'm at a pretty populated marina. Obviously, it only could have happened during the daytime when there was max sun, max power. But the thing is if it had only caught the bimini on fire, with the solar panels melting, it would have pretty much ruined my cockpit. All that melted plastic on there. I mean, I would have been scraping. It would have been disgusting. It would have been terrible. Beyond that, I also have my jerry jugs underneath my cockpit seat right there at the helm. Most of them are filled up with diesel, but one does have gasoline in it. and I have to have it outside, so it's a great place for it. And normally there's no way on earth that thing could catch on fire right there. But it is my thinking that if the Bimini had caught on fire, it probably would have caught the Dodger on fire as well. And it would have probably kept moving up to the sails. So everything on the boat would have caught on fire. But then also it probably would have caught the teak of my cockpit on fire. Most of my boat is all fiberglass. I like that. I like having fiberglass. But I have a teak grate and a teak seating, for my cockpit, and that could have easily caught on fire, and that would have been a little bit harder to put out as well. Than if it had gotten to the gasoline, that pretty easily could have been all she wrote, or if nothing else, it probably would have taken me out of the next cruising season. So that was a really, really, yet again, I kind of skated through by the skin of my teeth. If you talk to any sailor, though, they have their own, they skated through the skin of their teeth story. I don't think you can be a sailor and have it not happen. So yeah, these sort of things, this is what scares me about sailing is what I don't know. With spearfishing, I pretty much know the dangers. Whether I avoid them or not is a whole other topic, but I pretty much know the dangers. But with sailing, there are so many things that go into it, particularly with my electrical system, that I am yet to be proficient on. I'm not an electrical engineer. So if you're thinking about getting into the sailing aspect of things, definitely talk to veteran sailors. When you do a major project, maybe invite your longtime, world sailing friend over to your boat. What do you think about this? Hey, how do you like this? How do you like the way I soldered these two wires together? Things like that. But anyway, so closing down this long topic, thank you very much for listening so far. But in closing, if you're concerned with the adventure lifestyle, just do it. It's worth it. Just do it. You don't want to be old and gray. That's really the biggest danger, is getting to the end of your life, being old and gray, and just lying there, unable to go out and do this and having regrets. Every sailor I meet pretty much tells me and compliments me on how good it is that I'm doing what I'm doing now, and I'm not waiting till I get older. And I absolutely love hearing that. It really makes my day. And they really mean it. They're out now getting out and doing it, but all the sailors I meet obviously wish they had done it when they were younger. So do it now. I mean, there's no time like the present. I tell myself that constantly. It's not even something I mean to do, but it's always in the back of my head. But you gotta make that leap. You gotta make that leap to get out there and go for it. You gotta take calculated risks. You can't avoid risk altogether, or you're just sitting at home, waiting out COVID, which I get that. That's good in that one regard. But outside of that, you need to get out. You need to take calculated risks. I myself, actually, believe it or not, have yet to end up in the hospital for too long due to any injury or anything like that from my adventures. So, take that and, think about that for a little bit, although everything I've been through. And then I guess I could have mentioned, of course, a bunch of sharks have nearly bitten me and things like that, but I've always been good. And I've always managed to stay on top of things. So it is absolutely worth it to get out there for this. And now that I am getting a little bit older, I start doing more calculations and less risk taking. So I am learning a little bit as I get older. But anyway, I hope you guys all learned something from this. And I do hope you'll tune in to the next episode 7, where I'm going to talk about ciguatera. I have gotten officially fed up with the misinformation out there being perpetuated by especially other sailors, saying things like, if you put a piece of fish next to an anthill and they don't eat it, it's because it has ciguatera. Yeah, the CDC seemed to not mention that when they mentioned ways to test for it, so I don't think that's true. I'm a little jaded, admittedly, on the misinformation. It bothers me to see sailors are some of the most intelligent people, just because of how much you have to know. So it bothers me to see so many of them so misinformed and perpetuating it. So I'm going to talk about what ciguatera is, what causes it, how I got it, what it was like while I had it, how I got rid of it, how you can avoid it, treatment and testing for it. And this is going to be a really good podcast topic because it's a complicated foodborne illness. It's the best way I can say it. Yeah, it's a toxin you get from eating certain fish, not certain species necessarily. So I'll go more into that in episode 7. But other than that, thank you very much for listening, getting to the end of the episode. I appreciate it. I really do. Throw a comment down in the section if you liked this. Other than that, thanks again for listening to At the Helm with me, Adventureman Dan, and I'll see you on the next adventure. If you enjoyed this podcast episode and were either inspired, entertained, or maybe even you learned something, please consider supporting Adventureman Dan on Patreon. You'll get exclusive early access to my YouTube videos and epic mentories, Facebook posts, and other content sometimes months before the general public, as well as tons of extra not seen anywhere else. And it can cost as low as $3, but helps me out tremendously. Also, if you haven't yet, check out my Adventureman Dan YouTube channel for the full videos of my epic adventures, that I've edited so far. Bear with me as I continue to get caught up, but there's some great content on there already, as well as more to come. Or, if you like to do a bit of reading, take a look at the official Adventureman Dan Facebook page. There's tons of posts dating way back to the inception of Adventureman Dan, and it's easily the most complete and accurate archive of my adventures so far. And if you still want more, why not follow me on Instagram at adventureman_Dan, where I post some amazing, albeit random photos from my travels around the world. And of course, you can always check out my website, www.adventuremandan.life, as a central resource for all my content and the best way to get a hold of me. Or if you're interested in literally joining the crew aboard Adventureborn, I have a whole page on the website dedicated to just that. Go ahead and check it out. Alright, well, you've made it to the very end. Now get out and go start your own adventure.